Welcome back to Fishing the 262. We are about to embark on perhaps the most important fishing conversation of 2025, and it is not a forward-facing sonar video. This video will attempt to answer the number one question that I receive across all of my social media platforms, as well as just in my everyday life when I run into other anglers out there. And the question that I get the most is usually along the lines of, how do I fish on a budget in 2025? Let's get into that and let's see if we're even asking the right question, because I don't think we are. I'm going to start this video by talking about this rod and reel right here. This is what I would call a budget setup. And I've done some things to this rod that I can talk about to make it fish a little bit better. So those tips will hopefully help you out. And then we're going to broaden out the conversation into the more appropriate question. So hang with me, drop some comments, give me some feedback below, and let me know what you think. But this rod and reel has shifted the way that I view fishing gear probably forever. And I say that because I purchased this rod and reel to have in my boat for my kids to use, or if I got any guests that maybe aren't super into fishing, to give them a nice setup that didn't break the bank, that they could do a lot of different things with. I paid $150. It's a Daiwa Tatula. See if we can get that to focus in. Cork handle. I paid 150 bucks for it. The reel is a Daiwa Exceller. That cost me 80 bucks. I bought this in May. And now, before I made this video, I wanted to verify the prices because I know the tariffs have started to hit and the prices have gone up on a lot of stuff. So I went to Omnia Fishing. This rod, 200 bucks, you guys. The reel, I then went to Tackle Warehouse because I thought, there's no way this $150 reel jumped $50 in cost. So I went to Tackle Warehouse. And on Tackle Warehouse, it's still $180. It did go up 30 bucks over there. So, and this reel is now $100. So what was once a $230 setup is now approaching the $300 mark. And I thought, boy, I got to reanalyze this situation. But here's some things that we can do to the budget rods before we get into the meat of this conversation. We can use the reel as a tool. And in this case, we went with a 4,000 size spinning reel. And before you blow me up in the comments and tell me that a 4,000 spinning reel on a bass rod is overkill, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, but just look what it does to the balance point of this rod. It makes this rod more balanced because it's bigger, it's a little bit heavier, and it counterbalances the rod just a little bit, enough to get it to the balanced position. We loaded the spool up with braid. That's going to make it, between the balance and the braid, a slightly more sensitive setup. We are also saving money because we're using an FG knot. That might be a source of a whole nother video, but I do firmly believe the FG knot is the way to go for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the strongest. I've never seen a knot testing video where the FG knot isn't the strongest connector knot. And it's also the thinnest. So if it does get up in here into the spool, it's not going to create the problems that some of the other knots can cause inside the spool of a spinning reel in particular. So balance it out, put a little braid on it, and it'll become a little better fishing experience. But now let's get into the nuts and bolts of where this rod has shifted my opinion on whether or not we should even buy budget fishing gear in 2025. And I have put a lot of thought into this, you guys, and I want to walk you through my process on it because my answer might surprise you. My answer to that question is no. And I know you didn't expect me to say no because you have heard me say time and time again, fish within your means, stay within your budget. And I'm still going to tell you to do that, but I'm going to tell you to spend more money at the same time. And I know that's counterintuitive, but I think in the long run, once we go through my whole thought process, it's going to make some sense to you. And I'm going to use myself as an example on a number of different levels because when I got back into fishing, I was probably in my early to mid 20s. I fished a bunch as a kid. I got away from it. I got back into the sport. And in my early to mid 20s, I went out and bought a lot of inferior fishing equipment because I wanted it all. I wanted it all, and I wanted it right now. And in hindsight, that was one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made, because I wasted a bunch of money, you guys. At the end of the day, I ended up with a bunch of rods that I didn't use. I ended up with a bunch of rods that shortly after I bought them, I found myself upgrading them because they were being used so much, and it just was a bad way to go about it. So I think we have to be more intentional with the way that we buy our gear. And I think we have to be more intentional about the value that the gear we buy brings to the table. And I'm going to use St. Croix. And I know I'm going to get some hate for this too, because there seems to be a whole legion of people out there that hate St. Croix right now. But I do believe, after being in the boat with my buddies who have bought high-end gear, I've bought some high-end gear, I build some high-end gear, I honestly believe that the St. Croix tournament bass lineup is maybe the best bang for the buck out there. And you're going to ask yourself, what do I get from a St. Croix tournament bass rod that maybe I don't get in a $200 Daiwa rod? So let's break it down from my perspective as a fisherman and as a rod builder. At $300, St. Croix is going to give you a better guide train than this rod. It is going to give you a better rod blank than this rod. And it is going to give you a much more premium cork in their handle than this rod does. So you are paying for those components. But the bigger thing I think that you're paying for is the warranty. St. Croix will warranty that $300 rod for 15 years with a $60 replacement cost. Think about that. 2025, you go out and you spend $300 on a rod. 13 years from now, that rod breaks, you send St. Croix $60 and you get a new rod. You have essentially bought a lifetime rod for $300, you guys. That's good bang for the buck any way you slice it, in my opinion. I don't think you can do much better than that out there. And the other thing that we're going to gain when we buy nicer gear is a better experience. We're going to have more fun on the water. We're going to enjoy our time on the water more because we're going to like the gear that we're using more. And what's the byproduct of that? You are going to become a better angler because you are enjoying the process more. And I don't want to confuse people by saying that buying high-end gear automatically makes you a better fisherman, because it doesn't. That rod and reel isn't going to find the fish for you. It's not going to teach you how to set the hook or how to manipulate the bait. But what it's going to do is allow you to have more fun. And if you're having more fun, you are going to be more inclined to spend more time on the water, and more time on the water by default will make you a better angler. So yes, at the end of the day, the nicer gear will help make you a better angler. And I will die on that hill too. I just don't see any other way around it at this point, you guys. We have to be more intentional with the gear that we buy too. This is another area where I am guilty as charged of falling victim to the marketing. Because if you turn on social media right now, I don't care what platform it is, you are going to see an influencer like Fishing with Norm or Tackle Junkie. And there's nothing wrong with those. I'm not taking shots at those guys. But you will see the Tackle Junkies and the Fishing with Norms and the Hellabassins. And you will see guys that are fishing, the Toyota Series or the BFLs or the Opens. They're going to ram it down your throat. You are going to see the tournament anglers like Mike Iaconelli, Jacob Wheeler, all those guys. They're going to ram it down your throat that you need technique-specific rods for all the stuff that they're talking about. And in some cases, they're right, but in a lot of cases, I don't think they could be more wrong. So in other words, what I'm saying is be intentional about what you buy. Buy quality rods, but buy quality rods that are going to give you some versatility For example, if I was going to go out right now and buy a casting rod, I needed one casting rod. I would go out and I would buy something in the 7 foot to 7'3" range, medium heavy power, fast action. And the reason why that's the rod that I would hone in on is because I could do a lot of things with that rod. I can throw a weighted Texas rig. I can throw a weightless Texas rig Senko. I can throw a jig up to a ½ an ounce. I can probably swim a jig on that rod. I can probably throw a chatterbait a little bit on that rod. I can throw a topwater a little bit on that rod. I can burn a rattle trap a little bit on that rod. Now, is that rod perfect for all 7 of those techniques? Probably not, but at the end of the day, it's going to be good enough for what most of us are trying to accomplish on the water. Now, when it comes to the technique-specific stuff, I'm telling you, I am the king of guilty as charged, and I will throw myself under the bus. I live in Wisconsin. I own a damn punching rod that never gets used, you guys. My lakes don't set up for punching. It just doesn't happen where I live. I use my punching rod maybe once or twice a year if I'm lucky. So why did I buy it? I don't know why I bought it, to be honest with you. I thought I needed it. I thought it would be fun to have, and it just collects dust. And I think we all, if we're honest about the way that we fish, have a whole bunch of fishing rods in our rod locker that never see the light of day because we don't use them. If we're not using them, why are we buying them? Much like if my buddy Yon went out and bought a 7'6" light-powered hair jig rod. He lives in Miami. He fishes the Everglades. He fishes Okeechobee. He's not throwing a 1/16 ounce hair jig down there. It's just not the way they fish down there. So it makes no sense. So why would we buy that rod if we lived in Miami? We have to be intentional about the rods that we buy. And you're going to say, well, I need a jig rod. You're probably right. If you're a guy or gal that locks a jig in your hand 75% of the time, that's where you should put your money, is in your jig rod. Go out and buy a really good jig rod and put a nice reel on it and enjoy the heck out of it, because that's what you love to do. If you're a guy that likes to run out to 35 feet of water and pitch a drop shot around, go out and buy a really good rod for that technique. I'm not saying there's no place for a technique-specific rod. I'm just saying that most of us don't need a lot of the technique-specific rods out there. And I'm a perfect example of that. And I'm sure I could find several other rods in my collection and in my boat that don't see nearly enough use and were a waste of money. I was not intentional about the way that I spent that money, and that's on me. And that's where we have to get better as anglers. We have to get more intentional about the way that we spend our money, and we should take our money and buy the best possible gear that we can buy for the techniques that we do the most. And if you don't punch, don't buy a punch rod. If you don't frog, don't buy a frog rod. If you're not a guy that throws a spinnerbait around ever, I almost never throw a spinnerbait. I do throw a chatterbait quite a bit, but I don't need a spinnerbait specific rod in my boat. It just wouldn't make sense. But guess what? I have a spinnerbait rod. My kid uses it, thank God. Otherwise, it would also be collecting dust. So again, I want you guys to be more intentional about the way that you spend your money, and I want you to buy better equipment so that you're not replacing it down the road. And I'm trying to come to everybody from a really good place here. I'm not trying to put somebody into a position where they feel bad about their gear or anything like that. It's just about maximizing our time on the water and getting the most enjoyment while we're out there. At the end of the day, I think the way to get there is to buy less gear, but buy better, more expensive gear that you're going to enjoy more than the inexpensive gear, if that makes sense. So that's how I came to the conclusion I came to. No, we should not be buying budget gear in 2025. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. This is getting too long. We're approaching 15 minutes. We got to get out of here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Be kind to one another. Tight lines.